Good afternoon. This is Joe Forward, legal writer for the State Bar of Wisconsin. Today is May 26th, and I'm here again with Judge Randy Koschnick. He's the director of Wisconsin State Courts and former circuit court judge for Jefferson County. Judge, how you doing?
Fine, Joe. Always a pleasure to speak with you. How are you?
Doing well. Hanging in there. So we talked back in March, and that was when the court system was quickly moving to remote proceedings with some limited exceptions. Can you tell us where we are right now, where the court system is right now?
Sure. Well, just last week, Friday, which was May 22nd, the state Supreme Court issued a new order concerning court proceedings in Wisconsin. And it like many other organizations are doing, it's a phased-in approach, hopefully going back to more in-person proceedings. The biggest question was jury trials. Jury trials had been suspended under the orders issued in the last, 6 to 8 weeks, out of an abundance of caution, I think. But now the Supreme Court is allowing courts to resume jury trials and other in-person proceedings where you have multiple people in the hearing room or in the courtroom, if certain conditions are met. And I'd encourage folks, before I forget, to just check into wicourts.gov. We have a special COVID-19 tab, and there you've got all the latest court orders from the Supreme Court, the appellate courts, and the circuit courts, as well as the final report from the Chief Justice's COVID-19 task force for the court system. Basically, the May 22nd order requires each circuit court judge and each municipal court judge, for that matter, to come up with a plan to ensure that when we resume in-person proceedings, everybody is safe. And so the chief judge for each district has ultimate authority to say yes or no, the plan meets the required expectations to ensure personal safety and as well as due process. And so each judge essentially has to come up with a plan for his or her courtroom. At a minimum, each plan must, by virtue of the Supreme Court order, provide for masks. Everybody in the hearing room must be wearing a mask until further order of the court. So that would include the judge, the lawyers, the witnesses, the parties, jurors, anybody who's in the courtroom to observe, bailiffs, anybody who's in the courtroom has to be wearing a mask. This was one of the main recommendations from some doctors that we had on the chief's COVID-19 task force. We're also going to be disinfecting on a regular basis the courtrooms and be screening people who come into the courtroom. So you might be asked, you will be asked questions about whether you have any symptoms of COVID-19. You may have your temperature taken to see if you are displaying any symptoms. These types of things are included in the task force recommendations. And so each judge then submits a proposed plan to his or her chief judge for the district. The chief judge looks it over, discusses it with the judge whose quorum is at issue, make sure that all local stakeholders have been consulted with. So the judge is required to talk to the DA's office, the public defender's office, members of county administration, county executive, clerk of court, sheriff, local bar association. Anybody who may have an interest in the court proceedings in that county is consulted. And then if the chief judge agrees the plan meets the minimum requirements, the chief judge can authorize in-person proceedings to resume. And so we're expecting that to pick up now as we go forward with the order in hand.
Okay, so it'll be up to the local jurisdictions, the local chief judges of the districts, and so that will probably look different depending on what district you're in, right? I mean, it's gonna just depend on what the situation is in that district.
Right, well, some things will look different, some things will be the same. There is a minimum mandatory requirement, I'll say, that everybody wears a mask in the courtroom. So if you're gonna have any kind of, and this is in the Supreme Court order, so if you're gonna have in-person proceedings under the new order, everybody has to have a mask. So the Supreme Court did not leave that to the discretion of the chief judge or the local judge or local officials. That's required from this point forward under the new order. And I should say this as a clarification, with everything in the law, there's always exceptions, okay? So until the chief judge approves an order for that county, they're under the old orders from March and April. where everything is done remotely except for certain essential hearings. If there's a liberty interest at stake and it needs to be done in person, the chief judge can authorize those individual in-person proceedings. So there are always going to be exceptions. But big picture moving forward, yes, local adjustments are going to be allowed, but there's a base of masks at this point for everybody in the courtroom and minimum procedures to make sure that we do everything reasonably possible to prevent people from becoming infected or spreading the coronavirus.
Okay. And then you also mentioned the task force report, the COVID-19 task force report. The Chief Justice of the Wisconsin Supreme Court convened that with judges, DAs. I know Chris Rogers, the former State Bar president, was on that as a private practitioner. So what, and that is that really a guidance document for jurisdictions to look at and say, here are some of the things we should be looking at as we develop our plans to come back and reopen?
It is. I mean, judges and justices, for that matter, by and large, are not inherently experts in how to deal effectively with the pandemic. And so the Chief Justice wanted to make sure that we had a reliable set of data and other information upon which to make policy decisions. So the task force really assembled all of these stakeholders and people with specialized knowledge to come up with a set of recommendations for how we could resume in-person proceedings and do so safely. And so the Supreme Court order from May 22nd does incorporate the task force report as a central reference point for these new plans. Okay,
great. And that report is also on the court's website.
It is.
Correct? Okay.
Yes, it is.
So Judge Koschnick, as we move forward here, you know, we're into the summer months, and how do you think the court is going to, you know, just as the pandemic continues, how will the court sort of pivot as things develop? What's going to happen moving forward from here?
Well, I can tell you that myself and my staff monitor the situation daily. So we're checking in with judges every day and court administrators, and we're watching the news reports on the pandemic and what the numbers are. And so as we've all sort of learned the past several weeks, you've got to take it one step at a time, but we're going to phase back in to in-person proceedings as soon as we can do so safely. And you know, providing due process and protecting individual constitutional rights is also very, very important. And so it's a tough balancing act. You need to make sure that you comply with the constitutional requirements. You also want to make sure that you provide a safe environment. You know, and in the case of jurors, Joe, we're requiring people to come in for jury service, citizens, and when you receive a summons, it's not optional. It's a mandatory appearance for jury service. We want to make sure that if we're using the force of law to require citizens to come to court to serve on a jury or for any other purpose, that we're not going to unreasonably expose them to some type of danger or unacceptable risk.
Right. Well, Judge Koschnick, I know you're probably very busy, and I'll let you go here. Unless you had anything to add, I really appreciate you taking the time again to speak with us and give us an update on what's going on.
Well, I just really appreciate the bar, members of the bar, being patient with us and being able to work with us. We've got a lot of changes, a lot of remote hearings. There's going to be a lot of talk about going back to in-person proceedings, and we just appreciate the cooperation. You know, we can all work together, whether we're on the civil side or the criminal side or prosecution or defense or court administration. We all believe in the same basic fundamental, you know, priorities of following the Constitution and keeping people safe. So if we can continue to work together, be patient with one another, I think that's how we best serve the community at large and serve each other, in fact. So I would just encourage the members of the bar and others who may watch this to continue in that sense of cooperation.
Director of State Courts Randy Koschnick, thanks so much for being with us today.
Anytime, Joe. Thank you.